fair to Laurie Schwab with the New York Cosmos.
Still Johnson. Jones, this looks dangerous for Brisbane Lions. Jones, a good cross. Johnson. Arnold's forward, so's Manus Lamont. Still Robbie Slater. Twisting and turning, getting that one across. Lamont! Manus Lamont!
Play on, says the referee. Hayes is onside again. Shot! It's in the net! What a great goal by Graham Hayes!
No call! Score! Salamini for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Alzano with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli. What vision!
Blasts.
Yes! That's it!
Vujovic.
Beautiful goal! Here's Bozanic. They haven't! They might have won it!
Teammate from Heidelberg United and another local product, Charlie Ankus. How do you feel, Charlie?
A bit nervous, but I think I'll get used to it. Just get used to it and really put in 100%.
I'm joined by Socceroo, Olyroo, young Socceroo, Adelaide legend, and the man who must have one of the busiest passports in world football, Ross Aloisi. Thanks for joining me, Ross.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, George.
Absolute pleasure. You've had an amazing playing career. Now you're still coaching. Before we delve into where it all began and go through that journey, where do we find you currently?
I'm currently in Brisbane. So we sold up in Adelaide and moved up here. So we've been here for about 5.5 years now. And I enjoy the sunshine, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a bit warmer than the southern states, although Adelaide's not so bad.
Yeah, look, Adelaide gets quite warm in the summertime. The winter is actually cold. But here in Brisbane, the weather is unbelievable all year round, to be honest.
Yeah, you're lucky. Enjoy. And we're in lockdown here in Melbourne, and by the time this goes to air, we'll probably still be in lockdown. So good on you. Enjoy every bit of freedom and the good weather that you're getting. What are you doing work-wise at the moment in terms of football?
Well, I don't really have a job. I haven't had a job since my brother left as the head coach of the Brisbane Roar after, I think, 3 weeks. I was put on gardening leave. So basically paid out to the end of my contract, and at the moment I've just been coaching in the girls program that I started up, and also helping out at Brisbane Olympic with the women's teams and the school teams. So I went into Brisbane State High because my kids go to Brisbane State High, and I went there to see if I could get the program in because I've got female coaches, and it's always good to get them coaching full time. And so I went in for a meeting to see if we'd get the program in there and get the girls coaching at the school. And I came out with no program at the school, but I was coaching 2 teams. So it was the girls opens team and Year 7A boys. So that's basically what I'm doing at the moment.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the girls program that you are running.
Yeah, so when I finished with the Brisbane Roar, when I was on gardening leave, probably for about 3-4 months I wasn't doing too much, just doing a lot of reading, and then I decided to start up a girls program to do for girls to do extra training outside of their club football, because the club football, they follow the curriculum and whatnot, but watching female players playing while my son was playing or at training, I thought, there's obviously room for these players to get extra training and to improve, and so I started up the program so girls could do extra training outside, and then it became a program for female coaches as well. So I had Ish Norrie, Georgina Worth, and Caitlin Torpy as my coaches. I think they're all ex-Young Matildas. Current Brisbane Roar players, and so it just grew, and it became a pathway for not just the players but also female coaches. So our plan is to put them through their licenses as well. We pay for that. We pay for their coaching, and And we've also started with a physio, who was the Young Matildas physio, who I went away with for the qualifiers last November. She started up her own practice. So we've got an S&C as well for the girls. So we're just giving them the best possible opportunity to become professional footballers.
Okay, so you're investing back in the game, and especially in this scenario, the women's game, big time. Yeah,
and it's been, look, it really is rewarding. I've had a background in both men's and women's. I was coaching the Adelaide United women's team for 2 seasons. I was the head of women's football for Football Federation South Australia. I coached the NTC girls. I was in charge of the underpinning programs as well. So I've got a bit of a history with the women's game. I went to the 2015 World Cup as the assistant with the Matildas as well. So it really is a passion. And, you know, people always say, oh, you know, why don't you coach the boys? Why is it the girls? And it's no disrespect to the boys, but the girls, when they train, they want to learn and they ask questions and they do everything you ask. With the boys, it's a little bit different.
Need to do more convincing, do you?
No, sometimes they become a little bit lazy, and it's just different. And it really is a real passion of mine, coaching in the women's game. So that was the whole reason why I started up the program, and I love it. I really do. It's a full-time job without getting paid at all. So, but I know something will happen in return. And it's not, so I didn't do it for the money, that's for sure.
No, well, that's clear. But clearly, you put together a kind of overall program that somewhere along the line, if someone like the FFA or the Queensland FA grab hold of it and ran with it, they could get it up to like an accredited level and pretty much, you know, implement it Australia-wide, especially if it's helping not only players but the coaching side of it.
Yeah.
From that point of view, there's lots to like about it.
Yeah.
There's value there.
It's interesting because I speak to some of the QIS coaches and other coaches going around, you know, and I explain that the curriculum wants us to play out from the back and play a good brand of football, possession-based brands. But my argument there is, if the players can't do it, control the ball or pass the ball properly or hit the ball with their laces or be comfortable on the ball, how can you expect them to play out from the back? And they've only got a limited time when they train with the team. So that extra training, which we all did as kids, is going to help these players. And it has. You know, the proof is in the pudding. The parents are extremely happy with what the girls are doing, what their children are doing, and the girls are ecstatic. And last night we had the North Side training, and I think out of the 15 girls, I think they all won. Their teams won, and they were telling me how they did step overs, they did double drag back, a couple of Maradona turns. There was a few girls that scored 3 goals, a few scored 2, and you know, there was a couple of assists. So the girls are happy, and they want to come there and tell you what they've done and what they've learned in training, and that they've implemented in games as well with their club side. So that's the rewarding side of things.
Yeah. Well, you don't need me to tell you, but you grab any footballer, male or female, who actually looks forward to going to training or looks forward to their work because it's exciting and fun and they're learning at the same time, is going to make a big difference to the person who's dreading going to training and not looking forward to it, or bored out of their minds because of the continual drills of, you know, whether it be trying to play it out from the back or bouncing it off the 6 to the 8 and blah, 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 blah. There's got to be an element of fun while the learning goes, but hey, what do I know?
But but you're 100% right. And, you know, part of the program was about giving confidence to young female footballers or just young females. You know, how many times the players were scared to do, especially when we do one-on-ones or 2v1s. You know, they tend to be embarrassed if something doesn't come off. And I've always explained to them, you try these things in training, because if you don't try them, what we've been working on, you're not going to do them in a game. And I think that's the biggest thing, just watching these young ladies grow with confidence and you know, what they can do with the ball at their feet. And, you know, the amount of times they come and they say, oh, I've got 50 juggles, or I got 47, I was so close to getting 50. And, you know, that's part of just giving the girls confidence.
Yeah, no, look, it makes a huge difference. And like I said, the fun aspect is important while they're learning. It makes a big difference. But we'll move on. More importantly, let's go back, way back to the start. What's your earliest football soccer memory?
Oh, gee. Back then, soccer, wasn't it? I remember
Apparently.
I was a 5-year-old and my father signed me up at a team called Athelston Soccer Club, and I was playing in the under-8s, and that was probably my earliest memory. There's an embarrassing moment there when I think I dribbled like 3 or 4 players, and I got in front of goals and I stopped the ball and I took a run up. And by the time I got back to the ball, someone had taken the ball off of me. So that was probably my earliest memory. Probably the next best memory, I was 8 and my father said, I've just signed you up at Adelaide City, which is a team that we grew up following, having an Italian background. My father played at the club when they were Juventus. And I was playing in the under-12s and I remember training at the back of Olympic Sports Field, which was Adelaide City's home ground.
Yeah.
Back then, it was a shot put area because obviously it was athletics track around there and hardly any lighting. They're the earliest memories I have in football.
Okay. So I guess it's very special for most Italian kids growing up in Adelaide. Adelaide City effectively is the go-to club in terms of support. And then if you get the opportunity to play there, to wear the famous black and white stripes, you must have thought, that's it, I've made it, even at age 8. Your world must have been, at a peak at that point.
It was unbelievable because I remember our father used to take us on a Sunday afternoon. I think it was myself and my brother at the beginning, and then after my mother used to come and my sister. So there was only the 5 of us at the time, and we used to go and watch Adelaide City religiously. And I remember my mum dressed us like our father. So he had a brown leather jacket, he had pants on, and I think myself and John had a brown vinyl jacket, which we thought was leather.
Close enough.
Yeah, and, we used to go watch our heroes. I remember, John Perrin, Charlie Villani, back then, Dixie Deans, Egmont Muniz, the Brazilian, Peter Marshall in goals. Bugsy Neskelhus, John Neskelhus, Peter Rankin ended up coming through. So, there was a whole lot, and they were our idols. And, after the game, you'd go back home because I think the games were at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You go back home and you'd be in the front yard you'd commentate the game while you were playing, So, they were great memories as a kid.
Yeah. So I assume that other bloke who you mentioned in the brown jacket, John, when you went home, you had a slight advantage, about 2.5 years older, a little bit. Yeah, that's about right. So did you dominate him in the backyard or the front yard?
Always.
Yeah.
When until the age of 14, when he was bigger and stronger.
Okay. So eventually he bridged the gap and he caught up.
Yeah, for the 3-year difference, and he ended up, I think at the age of 14, he was taller than me and stronger than me, but I was probably technically better than what John was, because I was always a smaller player anyway. So, to do well in football, either you're going to have that physical strength or you've got to be smarter and technically better.
Okay. So through your junior career, did you represent the state? Did you get some accolades along the way?
Yeah, so I ended up making the state schoolboys team, under 12s. I think I was 11 at the time. When I was 12, I played under 13 state in Sydney at Parklea, which is now, I can't remember what they call it, Valentine Park, I think it's called now.
Okay.
Probably the biggest or the best time that I had were the under 14s and 15s. 14s was in Tasmania, and I was the leading goal scorer from midfield for South Australia. And that was my first call up into the national team, the under 16 Joeys for camp. And then Sydney, it was the same. I was the leading goal scorer again, and there was another player called Vince Jacopetto who we were both called into Joey's camp as well. And then went on to represent the Joeys at the World Cup 1989 in Scotland.
Okay, so that was the Will Hasty
Correct.
team? Yeah. Okay, so I've recently spoken to Will and Ray Gatt. So they've both mentioned the airport
incident
incident. So we don't need to go there. But clearly, I can't remember which one of them said you turned white. Now, that was quite the most interesting part of the story, because with your complexion, if you've turned white, you must have been scared out of your brains, or at least frightened at that point.
Yeah, look, you know what? It was really scary because, and not just the airport incident, because that was the end of it. It was we were stuck in transit in Colombo, and it was the first time I'd seen poverty. I think we were in the bus going to the hotel, and it was that hot. The windows were down, and you know, you saw people on the streets with you know, one leg or one arm, putting their hands in the bus when we were stopped, asking for, I don't know, I'm assuming they're asking for money. So that was quite scary. But that, yeah, once we got back, because we didn't have much sleep, and to see what happened at the airport it wasn't great at all. It was quite scary flying to, I think we were flying to Holland at the time, so didn't sleep too much on the plane either.
I can imagine. Just for the sake of the audience who haven't seen the other two interviews, a guy jumped off a
balcony
for a railing, didn't he, or something? And
yeah, he held on for a bit and then fell and hit the floor, bounced off of the ground, and there was blood everywhere.
Yeah, okay. We'll move on. Let's get back to the football. How did you enjoy the actual tournament in Scotland?
Yeah, it was good. It was that long ago. We played against East Germany.
Yeah, that's a while ago.
In the USA. At the time, the only time I got on, I think, was the last game against the USA. I think we were down 2-0. And myself, I ended up scoring the equaliser. I think Tony Pangello from Canberra scored, or John Montesano. I can't remember who the other. I think it was Tony Pangello. But you know, that team was actually a good squad as well, because Will was one of the star players. We had Tony Popovic, Selko Kalatz, Mark Schwarzer, Steve Corica was in the team. Eddie Lees, who was our captain, who I see every now and then in Brisbane. So there was some decent players in that squad as well.
Okay, so that's about the same time you started playing senior football at Adelaide City. Is that about when the breakthrough came through there?
Yeah, I played my first game in the NPL when I was 15.
Yeah.
16, I think I just turned 17. I played the first game against Wollongong, Macedonia, in Adelaide, and I set up Aurelio Vidmar to score one of the goals. I think we drew the game 2-2 from recollection, but it was probably a year later.
Okay, so what are your recollections of the NSL at that time, and more importantly, from your point of view, transition the NPL or State League, as it probably may have been at that particular time, would have been the equivalent of the reserve team. So the reserves would have played in that team till you got your call up, or till you earned your stripes again, the black and white stripes. But obviously that's what you were aspiring to. But when you finally, who gave you the call up? Who was the senior coach, Zoran, at the time? Yeah,
Zoran Madic was the coach. So John Perrin played, he was the coach of the State League side, which you're 100% correct. It was the State League. Back then was the Ampol Cup as well. So I think I was 15. It was myself, Joe Barbaro and Paul Pezos. We played against Bacala when I was 15. I think they were 16 in the Ampol Cup. Or one of the cup games, and then Zoran Madic gave me my call up for the NSL side. So, but back then you couldn't play. I think, if I remember correctly, maybe 2 players could come down from the NSL team and play, because they were worried about. Because back then I played in the State League, but before that they were in the State League 2. So you had to gain promotion, relegation, and I think they were worried about dropping players down to gain promotion. So, but it was
rules and red tape to stop the NSL teams.
You know, I played with a lot of my heroes in the NSL, because Aurelio Vidmar, Charlie Villani was my idol. Now, I don't know if many people remember Charlie. He was unbelievable. But then there was Aurelio Vidmar, who was my idol, and there was Steve Maxwell, Joe Mullen. Like I said, I grew up, you know, watching these guys. There was far out, that team there.
Yeah, Sergio Melter was in that team.
Sergio Melter was another one.
Yeah.
So we had Robert Zabika in goal, Tony Vidmar fullback, Alex Tobin, Milan Ivanovic, Paul Schillerbeer, and then there was Serge Melter, Steve Maxwell, Joe Mullen, Aurelio Vidmar. So to play with those guys was a dream come true. My father always said, he after, he never told us at the time, he goes, "Oh, my only dream was that you'd play state league for Adelaide City. I never ever thought you'd ever play NSL." So, you know, and he was probably my biggest influence in football.
Yeah. We're all fans, right? We all love our football. So you go from the state league and you're working at that. So there's a part of you that's hard driven, there's an ego, because we all have an ego. Otherwise, we don't try to aspire to anything. Controlling the ego, that's a different thing, but we all have an ego, or else we wouldn't be playing sport. So you're working up, but then you finally get that call from Zoran, and then you've got, I don't know, how long did he give you between, say, when you're going to play? How long was it? A week, 2 days? How long did you have to think about it and sit on that?
I knew that I was in the squad. I remember because it was a Sunday game and my cousin got married on the Saturday night, and I think Zoran knew that. And I think I must have known during the week. So I went to the wedding, and I think my father took me home at 8:30 to get a good night's sleep. But then he didn't tell me that I was starting until that day.
Yeah. Okay. So you start. How did you play? What's your recollection of the day?
I remember my legs were weak, but yeah, I played okay. Okay. Like
was that the nerves? Do you think it was just?
Yeah, 100%. You know, you're playing in front. You know, it's a dream come true playing National League for Adelaide City. You're playing with all these players that were your idols and heroes, and yeah, I think I did okay.
Yeah. How were the senior guys towards you? Do you recall?
Yeah, they were really good. They were helpful. You know, I think Serge Melter was a no-nonsense player, you know, and if you had to have a go, he would have a go, but also encouraged you as well. Joe Mullen probably spoke the most. Sorry, I'm shaking. I'm freezing.
No, that's all right. You need to turn the heating on.
Aurelio Vidmar obviously was, you know, again, he was a hero of mine, and I remember setting him up, and he scored the header, and you know, the hug, you know, from him was something special. But they were all great. Neville Flounders was playing that day. That's another player that I forgot. But no, they were fantastic. They really were. They were so helpful.
Yeah, okay. So I assume, being a young boy, you're filling in for a senior player at some point.
Yeah, there must have been someone missing. You know what? Playing in the state league, Brian Northcote had been playing NSL since day dot, I think.
Yes, correct.
And so he was playing regularly in the state league, and Bugsy Neskos was the coach. So he was my main coach playing in the state league. And I remember Brian used to be so aggressive towards everyone, opposition players, his teammates. But you know what? We probably needed it. We needed a leader out on the field, and you know, it was really, really good playing with him. And, you know, you didn't realise it. You kind of realised it at the time, but afterwards, you actually saw, you know, what he did at Adelaide City was phenomenal as well. Yeah,
well, I think it's really important, and in the conversation about, you know, when we compare development of players from way back to today and the comparison, and I, rightly or wrongly, I always think that growing up in an environment, especially if you're a reserve, say from under 16s, you move into the reserve category, and it's open age. So there might be a couple of what at the time are considered old timers or hacks or people past their prime. But if the clubs are selective about who they allow to play in the reserves with these old guys, the education that the younger boys can gain from having some good pros like your Brian Northcote and the type around, it's invaluable, especially on the field, that education live as it's happening, you know, just that little bit of advice at the right time, rather than waiting to half an hour later when you're in the change rooms and barely can remember what happened because, you know, so much has happened since. I think it gets lost in the transition of the stories about our development from then to then. And I think playing with senior guys when you're 15, 16 made a huge difference.
Yeah, look, it did. And I think there was a credit to Adelaide City as well that, you know, and Brian Northcote to even go and play on a Saturday afternoon with, because most of us were young kids. And there was a philosophy of the club as well. You know, not that we realised it at the time, but the philosophy of the club was to bring up junior players. So there was a whole heap of us. I mean, there was myself, Joe Barbaro, Carlo Telladira, I think Dennis Martinello was in goals, Chris White. There was, you know, again, Vince Jacopetta, who ended up coming through, Ronnie Grasso. There was a whole heap. But for Brian Northcote to play with us and give us that experience and that drive, because we were playing against some top players. I mean, I know what it was like in Victoria, New South Wales, and South Australia was the same. There were a lot of footballers that played for, whether it was Croatia or Beograd or Polonia. These were ex-professional footballers in their own country.
Yeah.
So, and then you had the Scottish and the English that were coming out. They were professionals that were playing either for West Adelaide or other clubs. And, you know, they were tough games. You know, we used to get kicked quite a bit.
Yeah.
I remember Azzurri had a lot of English players, another Italian club. And it was probably my first experience of copping abuse from supporters. I couldn't understand it, because I was thinking, why are they abusing me for? They don't even know who I am. I mean, surely no one knew who I was. But I remember Brian Northcote took a corner and I scored off of the corner, and yeah, he said a few choice words to the supporters, and it was an experience. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and I think that's the same here. It was exactly the same. You know, the expats, the Scots, the Brits, even that training, that professionalism, if you want to call it, or the attitude about, you know, every session's like your last session, and then you play that way. And then when at the end of the game, you're all friends again. It's not about being personal or whatever. Yeah. But maybe at the time, I didn't even appreciate it. But then realise as I get older, and my son's going through the system now, 18, 19, and I kind of think about it. I wish he could be learning in that type of environment, because it's going to certainly help you long term. Because when you look back, and then we become the older statesmen, we start doing things that these guys did to us, testing us, pushing us, but at the same time, a bit of tough love. But then when you need to put the arm around the person at the same time, you're willing to do both. And I think that's what gets lost in the under 21 level, because they're all kids. Yeah. So there's no one to learn from, you know, other than the coach. But the coach, that's a tough job, right?
Yeah, look, I think you're on the money there. And like I said, it was great playing against these players. You know, there was Mladen Putinets, I think he used to play for Adelaide, Croatia. There was Ante Lubic. And then there was two Polish players. I can't remember their names. I couldn't remember them back then. And, you know, these guys played professionally in their countries. Yeah. But I remember Putinets come up to me after one of the games and said, you know, you're going to have a career in football. And I thought, you know, I didn't know if he was just saying it for the sake of saying it, but, you know, obviously I had a good game that game. And it was great, because you watch some of the things that those guys did was unbelievable. Anyway, it was a great time and great experience. Yeah,
for sure. All right. So you were lucky enough in a couple of years to play in an NSL grand final and win an NSL championship with your boyhood team, albeit as a penalty shootout, right? Is that right, at Olympic Park?
Correct.
Yeah. So, what do you remember of that day against Melbourne? Croatia at the time.
Going back a couple of weeks before, we made the NSL Cup against Marconi, the Cup final. We played at Highmarsh Stadium and it was raining. And I started to play regularly in the first team. I was 18 at the time. And I remember Mark Schwarzer was in goals. Steve Corica was playing as well. And they had a star-studded lineup. Marconi didn't. We beat them. Ernie Tapai was in the team, and he was probably one of my closest friends in the team. Then I went into the final series and we beat Wollongong at home. I hit the crossbar with a header. I don't know how, because I couldn't head the ball to save my life. And then we went to Sydney to play Sydney Olympic, Parramatta Stadium. And I remember my brother was in the AIS, and the AIS just played before us in one of their finals games. So they were watching the game. And Carl Viet scored, I think it was, we won 1-0. And I remember Zoran said to me after the game, because we used to take penalties from the NSL Cup final, so throughout the week we'd take penalties at training, and I'd always hit them the same way. And I missed once in, I think, 5 or 6 weeks against Rob Zabika. And when he brought me off, he said, I was going to leave you on because we're going to go to penalties, but he goes, you can't run anymore. And I said, yeah, no problem. And then we played, so we beat them, played South Melbourne. It was a night game, Sunday night. And we had a whole heap of supporters come up from Adelaide. And I remember, is it Steve Blair and Mehmet Durakovic? I don't know how I got through them, but I got through them.
Not many got through them.
No. And I remember hitting the ball with my left foot, and it went in the roof of the net. I can't remember who the goalkeeper was.
Might have been McLaren. I'm not sure, but it might have been Bruce McLaren.
McLaren in goals. And I remember Mehmet Durakovic complaining that I poked him in the eye or hit him in the face or whatever. Anyway, Calviet scored the second goal, and we won 2-0, and that was incredible. And they got to the final, and I think Andrew Marth took a shot and just missed the top corner, and I had a chance early in the game as well, a one-on-one, that I tried to line up with my right foot. So we went on the counter-attack, and I tried to line it up with the right foot to bend it around David Miller in goals, and it ended up bouncing onto my left, and I hit it with my left like I did the week before, and Dave Miller made the save, but then it went to the penalties, and I don't think in that extra time I touched the ball too much, and I'm sure Zoran left me on for the penalty shootout. He ended up scoring the penalty, and Joe Mullen stepped up to take the penalty to win the game, and he had no idea that if he scored, we were winning the game. So he scored, and he put his hands in the air, started to run back, and he saw everyone sprinting towards him, and then realised that we won. And yeah, that was incredible. It was an incredible 5 weeks. I just turned 19 at the start of the final series, so that it was something that I would never ever dreamt of having happening.
Exciting times, and especially doing it with your boyhood. I mean, that's not many get to do that. You know what I mean? With your boyhood team, the team you've supported, you've grown up watching, you played the juniors there. The chances of that happening right through to the NSL are very, very slim. I'm sure the celebration, it would have been a tough few weeks, especially with the prelim in Melbourne and the grand final in Melbourne, the travel and whatever. Yeah. So an outstanding effort, and obviously from then on, probably in a couple of years, the Knights decided, well, they started to take over, and their gun side of the mid-90s probably just was starting to take over from where Adelaide City had dominated for a good 6 or 7 years, because Adelaide City were a dominant force for so long in that period, but it was kind of just maybe starting to peter away a little bit. Yeah,
it was, I think, so from that, after that final series, the Adelaide City won in 86. I know Brunswick Juventus won in 85. And then there wasn't too much going on from 86 to 92 with Adelaide City. And then I remember I went overseas from there. I went to Belgium through the same agent of Aurelio Vidmar, which through a friend of ours, Phil Scardino, had that contact. And the club, so it was the Belgian First Division. I went on trial, and I'm going away from it a little bit.
Oh, that's right.
I ended up coming back because back then there was transfer fees as well, but Adelaide City allowed me to go on loan for 3 months, and I played for 3 months in the Belgian First Division, which was an amazing experience. And that's probably where it went pear-shaped for me as well, a little bit, because from my recollection, the Adelaide City wanted $150,000 for me, and the club said, no, we're paying 100. And, it was amazing because the coach really, really liked me over there, which I don't know why. I mean, you're a kid.
Which club was this?
It was FC Boom in Enfield. Anyway, at the end of the 3-month period, they came in and they said, you can't train today because your loan period's over and they're not going to sell you. And so I ended up calling my father, spoke to Zoran on the phone, and the agent said, I'll take you to French Second Division. And I was a little bit homesick at the time, to be honest. And I thought, you know what, I'll go back to play another year for Adelaide City and then come back over. And I thought, because I thought that was that easy. In I think it was 92, 93. When I came back, I ended up having a groin operation, but we made the grand final again against Marconi. We lost that, I think, 1-0 to Andy Harper penalty. And then that Adelaide City really dominated from 92 and, for a few years after that until Melbourne Croatia won that grand final and then they took over. But that's when I went to Brunswick Juventus.
Yeah. What was the reason behind that move? Was it just to play NSL again?
No, I was playing. No, I was a little bit, I'll be honest with you, I was disappointed in the fact that, I blamed the club, but it probably wasn't the club. It was probably more Zoran, although, I didn't understand why for $50,000 back then you wouldn't allow me to go and live my dream playing as a footballer. And again, for 3 months, I played in the Belgian First Division. There was the only one game, which was at Charleroi, where I was on the bench, but all the others I started. So, I played against Club Bruges, and there was a player, I remember, so the first game was against Antwerp, in Antwerp, and we beat them 3-2. And Hans-Peter Lenhoff was a superstar. He was a German player that played for Antwerp. And I remember the second game was against Club Bruges at home. It was a packed stadium, and the coach was saying the team, and he left me out of the team. So I thought, and the last player, he said, was me. So he said, and Ross, you hold the key for us winning the game today. And I was thinking, I was 19, playing against a player called Frankie van der Elst, who was a Belgium
legend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, you've got to stop him today. And, if you stop him, we'll win. I think we lost 2-1. But I never got near him. It was incredible. So, yeah, when I came back, I was probably disappointed. I wasn't playing regularly again after the groin operation. And I went back overseas to trial again and couldn't get a trial. And that's why I said it was a tough time, because my brother had just signed for Standard Liège. After 6 months, he moved to Antwerp and ended up coming back. And I think Joe Mirabella, I think Lou Stick was involved, Vito Guerra, Peter Bellazzoni. So I ended up going to Brunswick for $10,000 in the end.
It's a lot cheaper than the $100,000 they could have got if they let you go to Belgium, right?
Yeah.
That adds to the frustration, surely, when you think about it from a logical point of view, that they'll let you go for 10 when they could have had 100.
Exactly, and I couldn't understand it. I honestly couldn't. Later on in life, you kind of, forget about it and whatnot, but you just think what could have happened. But then you think, you shouldn't live in the past. And, my time at Brunswick Juventus was a really good time as well. We had, I think John Margaritis was the coach who signed me.
The wily old fox.
I reckon it was after 2 games he got the sack as well. And Kenny Murphy,
really?
Yeah, and Kenny Murphy was unbelievable for me.
Yeah.
He really was. He gave a lot of confidence to the players. He'd been at Melbourne Croatia when we beat him in the final. So it was a good time in Melbourne, but for different reasons, my ambition was still to go and play overseas. But when I was at Brunswick Juventus, that's when I made my Socceroos debut.
No, so, yeah, 94. Yeah.
And it was funny because with the Olympic team, I was playing as a sweeper. Never played there before in my life. So we used to play with a back 5, 4 defenders and then the sweeper. And so I was playing as a sweeper. When I played with the Socceroos when I was 20, I was playing in the centre of the midfield. So I ended up going back to West Adelaide, which I was hated by supporters.
Now going to the enemy. And you were there a while, actually.
I was.
You must have won them over somehow.
With the Greeks, look, you know what? It's sad when I look back at growing up at Adelaide City. You're black and white through and through. And back then, no one went to West Adelaide from Adelaide City. I think one of the only players was Chris Manu.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
West Adelaide. So I didn't do it out of spite. It was Raul Blanco that desperately wanted me there, and he was the coach. And then you had, players like Jose Iriarte playing, Gimenez, Brownie. There was a fair few. Gus Cerro, I think, was there. Stan Lazaridis. So, I was there for a long time. They treated me unbelievably well. And from there, I got sold to the Swiss club, in FC Aarau. So, you know, my time at West Adelaide, we didn't win much, but, you know, I had a great time. The committee and the supporters were really good to me.
Yeah, cool. Just going back to the Socceroos, you came off the bench against Kuwait.
Yep.
It would have been a friendly.
Malaysia.
Come on for Milan Blagojevic.
Yeah.
Is that right? Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool.
I do.
And then a few days later, you made your full debut against Japan in front of about 40-odd thousand, so a decent crowd. Who was Eddie Thompson was the man who gave you your what's your recollections, and how did Eddie break it to you?
Geez, I don't want to say too much because there was a player that couldn't play because of a black toe.
A black toe.
So I remember Paul Wade was in the midfield, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't to start the game. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I'm
just going to look through those midfielders from the game before to see. Yeah, go on.
Look, I think it was Eddie or Aarau, one of the two, came up to me and they said, "Oh, you're going to start the game," and it was just before the game too. And I was like, okay. I was thinking, far out, this is unbelievable. Because we knew it was a packed stadium as well, because, you know, rolling up to the game, there was just people everywhere, and then you go out onto the field, and, you know, as you do. Well, I just followed everyone else anyway, so I thought it was the norm. And that game there, I remember Paul Wade, who was an absolute champion, top captain, played for, I think it was South Melbourne Hellas at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me, he goes, "I know that you're really good on the ball." He said, "But, you know, keep it to 1-2 touch, keep the ball moving, and, you know, get yourself into the game." And he coached me through the whole game. And you know, you can't thank someone enough for doing that. Especially, you know, I still felt that I was a young kid. So, you know, I think we drew 0-0.
Yeah, 0-0 with Japan. So.
Yeah, and you know, I was over the moon. I had Chichi Mendes, who was one of my best mates in the squad as well, and he was wrapped for me for playing. And I remember going to the bus, and obviously everything's fenced off, but you had the fans, the Japanese supporters. I think they must have been 5-6 rows back from the fence. You know, they were that jam packed, and they were just screaming and yelling and so a couple of players started to throw their socks and shorts and whatever else to the supporters, and they were just screaming. And it was amazing because, you know, you think they're screaming over socks that we wore too.
Smelly socks, dirty socks. Yeah.
So that was, you know, that was a top night. And yeah, it was something special. You know, it's always special to represent your country.
Absolutely, and congratulations for that full cap. It's important, mate. It's important. Good reward for doing what you do. But then the overseas journey really starts to open up for you now. You're going on a world tour from here, just about.
Oh yeah, far out.
Was Switzerland next? Was that
Switzerland? Yeah, I signed at Aarau. I scored 6 goals and I don't know how many assists. I was the MVP for Aarau.
yeah.
And
are you playing as a 6 or just
as an 8? So we played a 4-4-2.
Yeah.
And I played as an 8. So the 6 was a Polish international. Yeah. So I had, that was probably my best season in Europe. And then I went from there. There was a French club, Lorient, the French First Division club, who were interested in me. I had to go on trial. So I went on trial and they just won the World Cup. So we're playing against Guingamp, who I think were in the 2nd division, and Jean-Pierre Papin was on the other team. And it's a play against Jean-Pierre Papin. You know, it was amazing. And but I remember it was hot. It was really hot. It was the summertime. We were playing in some small field. It was jam-packed, and, you know, they were still freaking out and buzzing because they had won the World Cup. And I remember after the game, I played, I think, 60 minutes, and the coach said to me after the game, "We want to sign you. Are you happy to stay?" And I was ecstatic. French First Division dream come true. You know, I never thought that I'd play in France, let alone in the French First Division. But the deal kind of fell through. I think money issues. I went back to Switzerland, and they had signed another player to replace me. So there was another fight to get back into the starting 11, and then all of a sudden the deal was back on, and all of a sudden I was in France. So I signed a 4-year contract. I remember going to Paris to sign. There was myself, a player from not Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and another one from one of the Guinea countries. And then we drove to Lens because the team was playing in Lens. And there was the loudest crowd I've ever experienced in Lens. So where Robbie Slater played.
Correct, yeah.
I think
the red and yellow. Yeah, red and yellow.
Yeah. So then because I signed the 4-year deal, stupid me, didn't realise that you're a project for the team. And I played
long-term project.
Yeah, yeah. Now I think the older you get, the more you start to realise after that. You sign a 4-year deal. You might not play, or you'll play the first season. The second season you should. The third season they really want to play you, because the fourth they want to sell you, and that's how they make the money.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, and I really didn't have the agent in my ear telling me that. And I played Lyon. Was my first game, my first and only game. I remember going a 1-on-1. And I hit it with the outside of my foot, very similar to what I did in Switzerland. I scored in Switzerland doing the same thing. It hit the crossbar and went over. And anyway, the coach said to me, look, your fitness level's not up. For the next 3-4 games, playing the second team, which played in the 4th division, I think. And then the president got the sack, and then things changed. And then, you know what? I ended up playing with some unbelievable footballers, because Patrice Loco was, I think it was, not that I think, I know he was an ex-French international, he was a striker, and he ended up coming into the squad. And, so I made a lot of good friends that were top footballers that played for France. And I wanted to leave because I wasn't playing, and they were saying, stay, you'll play next year, be patient. And then there was a loan deal going through with, I think it was Nice, and I don't know what happened. And I said to the coach, you didn't tell me that, why didn't you tell me? And he said, no, you got to go to Caen. So they're in the 2nd division. Okay. And I was like, Nice, Caen, it's all the same, it's all on that coast. And I was like, unbelievable. Now the French, a lot of them don't talk to you. They'll speak, but they'll speak to you in French. And my French wasn't the best at the time, but I had some good friends in there. And I remember the captain, who I played in the same position as him, he never spoke to me, or hardly ever spoke to me. And when he did, it was in French. And I remember going into the shower, and he said to me, so you're going to go to Caen in English? And I said, you can speak English? And he said, yeah. And he said, but don't go to Caen. And I said, why not? And he said, they're not paying their players. And I was like, So eventually I didn't go to Caen, and the following season they folded, and I was thinking, that was amazing. He didn't speak to me, but he had the courtesy of actually letting me know not to go. And the assistant coach and most of the players were saying, don't go, stay, you'll play. I ended up going to Graz in Austria. Yeah. And I played in... I knew they were in the Europa League, so I ended up playing Europa League. Klaus Augenthaler, who won the World Cup with Germany, Germany was my coach. So when I look back, I was like, I should never have left France, because I had the best coach in Christian Gourcuff, best coach I've ever had, tactically. He taught me a lot. We trained twice a day, twice a week, and then every other day we trained. We played on a Saturday, and then Sunday was free, and you're back in on the Monday. But technically, I was the best I ever was. And tactically, I learnt the most at that period of time. I went to Austria, and after 6 months, Klaus Augenthaler left. The coach that took over didn't like me at all as a footballer. I think his words were, you're a five-a-side player.
Nice. Take that for a slap.
I suppose he had to say what he had to say, or do what he had to do for me to want to leave. But in saying that, he kept on playing me week in, week out. So,
just going back to France, sorry, not many Aussies have played in France. I would imagine not even 10. So they're less than 10. They're over, whatever, we'll call it 30, 40 years since we've been exporting players. So that's unique in itself. Did your brother play in France?
No.
No, well, there you go. It's probably the only place he didn't play either. You got one up on him there.
Yeah, no, he played in the 3 top leagues in the world, which were the EPL, Serie A, and also the.
He's one of the few. He's got that. But you've got France on him. Definitely bragging rights. But you're saying about improving the coaching, improving your understanding, which can happen because I've heard, I can learn. We can all learn now. So our understanding tactically can always improve just from being around knowledgeable people. But you're in your mid-20s and you've been playing a fair bit of football perhaps, or, early 20s, mid-20s. Other than extra sessions, how does he improve your technique? Like, how does that coach make you better technically?
So technically we used to do, and this is where, with my program, I do a lot of this stuff as well. So the curve or curva training, we used to do a lot of that in our warm-ups. We used to do a lot of passing exercises. Tactically, and that's where the ball moved very, very quick. So this is the first time they ever did video analysis with the coach. So we used to do that twice a week, I think it was. So the analysis on our team and then the analysis on the opposition. But that was the very first time. Never done it before. We had clear structures. So at the beginning of the season, he would go through all our structures, how we wanted to play defensively, tactically. So he was a 4-4-2. And zonal defending. And I remember when I first went there, I think it was the first 2-3 weeks when we were defending. If it wasn't in my zone, I ended up following the player anyway, and he'd stop the session and say, here we're zonal. So he spoke a bit of English. And then you pick up the language anyway. You can't speak it, but you understand what they're talking in football terms.
Yeah. And
so he made it very, very clear that it was zonal. So I'd follow him into another zone, and then I'd set him up to either for the player next to me to win the ball or force him into an error. But technically, it was the ball work that we did in training. It was, I know that people say isolated training where you're with the ball. You had the ball at your feet the whole time. And just simple stuff like cuts and turns and whatever else. Class at isolated training. So it was a French first division, mind you. And we were doing a lot of that, and that's how I become so good technically. But the game was faster. You were playing with better players. So then I started to learn the no-look pass because they read your passes very, very easily.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how I become a better player. But you're playing with better players. And the game was super quick. You didn't dribble because you couldn't. You 2-3 touches on the ball and that was it. And you had to be sound in your technique. And that's how you got us there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, it's easy to say, I learned this or someone helped me with this, but it's important that we explain and elaborate on how that can actually be done, because with our curriculum, obviously the isolation training, the repetitive skill training sort of got thrown to the side a little bit because it wasn't in the book as such, but it's still such an important factor that for an individual to be able to control and turn and pass well.
Yeah. And back in France, and like I said, tactically he was the best coach. Technically he got me to a level that I'd never been. But also we started, this is the first time I started to do plyometrics. We did a lot of weight training, explosive weight training. And so he was probably the all-round coach. I remember he fined me one day. So at the end of the first season, I'd been married the year before, but I didn't go on a honeymoon because I went straight back to playing in Switzerland. And it was the last game of the season. I wasn't involved in the squad, and I asked him if I could go a week early to go on my honeymoon. And I was going to Hawaii. And he said, yeah, no problem. Anyway, when I came back, first training back, pre-season training, it was a whole new squad. There's a lot of players still there. And they, in French, he singled me out and he said, and you're fined a week's wage or whatever it was, because you went missing the last week of the season. And I said to him, okay. I said, I asked you if I could go, and you said yes. And he said, did you have it in writing? And I said, yeah, but you said yes. And he said, did you have it in writing? This is in front of the whole squad, mind you. And I said, no. And he said, well, then you're fined. And I said, and I left it. And then, he sent the team for a lap. And I pulled him aside and I said, but coach, I asked you. And he said, Ross, I teach you a valuable lesson. Anytime you do something, get it in writing. You didn't have it in writing, and I'm teaching you a lesson. So, and even with contracts, when people do contracts, and I learnt later on that they say, yeah, don't worry, we'll pay for it anyway. So, whether it's your apartment or give you a car or whatever it is, but if it's not in your contract, let me tell you, you ain't getting it.
Yeah.
So, and that was a learning experience from him. I didn't understand at the time. I thought he was really rude. Going back thinking about it, it was, like he said, he was teaching me a lesson. But, going into, so when I went to Graz, I had, there was a transfer fee, and Graz would sign me only on a free. And I went into his office and he said, I can't remember what it was. The euros weren't in then. I think it was French francs, but, the equivalent to $200,000, $300,000, whatever it was. And I said, how'd you come up with that? That's more than what I earned. And he pulled, I kid you not, he pulled from his drawer and he put it in front of me, the contract from my agent. He said, this is how much we paid your agent for you to come here. And I was like, you're kidding me. Yeah, so these are all learning experiences. So I severed ties with that agent.
I can imagine. Was it a good figure?
Yeah, it was the figure that they wanted for my transfer fee. Because I said,
man.
Yeah. I said,
so I just wanted that back.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So basically, look, I don't know. I'm assuming that the club pays the agent pays whoever he needs to pay, and he gets his. But, as far as your contract goes, I was thinking, I'm not on that money, so what do you want that money for? And anyway, so I ended up going on a free, which was interesting. But anyway, it was a lot of learning experiences there. It was tough. It really was. But it was. Yeah. I regret leaving France because I think that was the best time of my footballing career as far as I went as a footballer, as far as I went, even though I wasn't playing, but I learnt so much. And, you're not playing, but you're playing in the second team, which play in the 4th division.
Yeah.
And that was a tough league to play in.
Of course. Obviously, you're going to end up from Austria. I think you went to Italy. Is that right? Is that how? Yeah. Just, you can talk us through, because I think, was it Serie D in Italy predominantly that you played?
No.
No?
It was Serie C, which is the division. But when I was in Austria, I think it was pre-season.
Yeah.
And the first team, so the first 11 playing against the second 11. So it's the first team squad, and I was in the second 11, and I think I scored a hat-trick against the first 11. And there were a couple of agents there, and after the training session, the football director said to me, there's an agent here from Italy who wants to speak to you. And I said, okay. Obviously a dream to play in Italy. And he said, look, I think I've got a club for you. Would you be interested to go? And I said, absolutely. Now, he said, I can't tell you the club. And when it happened, so this is over a 2-week period, he said, start driving towards Venice. And it's in the second division. Yeah. I jumped in my car. Obviously, I had permission from the club to go. Jumped in my car. He said, when you get to Venice, call me. So I called him and he said, head towards Treviso. Treviso in the Serie B. So the following day, I went to the hotel. He told me the hotel. I went to training in the morning. And then this is the whole thing about Italian culture, right? So after training, the players eat at the training ground, which was at the stadium.
Yeah.
And they said, you want pasta? I said, yeah, please, I have a plate of pasta. And then they said, you want prosciutto and grana padano, the cheese. And I said, I'll die of thirst if I have that. I didn't realise that that's what the players ate before a game. I didn't realise the salt was what they were, so they didn't get cramps and whatever else. So anyway, so I played that night against Vicenza, who was in the Serie A. And the following day, they spoke to the agent. The agent said, look, they want to sign you, but they want you to play tomorrow, which was 2 days later, with the fringe players that were coming back from injury or weren't playing. And I was like, do I really have to? Anyway, bucketed down, and we played against the provincial side. And it was in the Gazzetta dello Sport, so the pink Italian paper, that I had played and that they wanted to sign me, and I did really well and whatever else. And I was thinking, why do I have to play in this game? Anyway, it poured down, and I don't think I kicked the ball. I remember kicking a lot of opposition players, but not the ball, because it was boggy. And so I was thinking, what's going on here? And then another agent called me and said, Alzano want to sign you. They're in the Serie C, 5 games in. They'd just been relegated from the Serie B. They're sitting second to top with, I think, Modena at the time. And I knew a player that was playing there, Stefano Salvatore, who became a really good friend of mine. And so they said, but for you to sign. So I was unsure what was happening at Treviso. And they said, you've got to pick me up at the airport. So I had to drive from Treviso to Verona, from Verona to Bergamo, signed the contract that night, drove back, went to training the next morning with Treviso. And I said to the coach, look, I have to go back because I think I'm here on holiday, knowing that I knew that I signed at Alzano, and he didn't. And he said, well, have you signed the contract yet? Is it done? And I'm thinking, what have I done here? I've just signed the 3rd division, and I'm thinking we'll get promotion and whatnot. And he's desperate to have me back. And anyway, I go to Graz and end up going back to Italy. And the agent that took me to Treviso was pretty annoyed with me, and Treviso were pretty annoyed with me as well, that I went behind their back and signed in Bergamo. So the 2 regrets that I really had were not staying in France and then not signing at Treviso, because, you know, you Serie B. I don't think people realise how tough it is playing in the Italian 3rd division, because although I learnt a lot tactically, and physically I was much better, because you do a lot of running. I mean a lot, and a lot of gym work. There was a fight every week.
What was the secrecy about going to Treviso? What was the story behind that secret?
I was scared that what happened about the agent calling me up, taking me to Alzano. That's what the agent was scared of. He was scared.
Trying to keep it locked in. And
so they let people know, but I didn't realise that they were so heavily into negotiation. Plus, at Treviso, they were talking about money I've never earned before, and I was thinking, it was ridiculous. You know, that amount of money. I never ever played for the money, but that money there. You know, you're talking about 4 tickets back to Australia. You know, there was only me and my wife. I don't know what I needed 4 tickets for, but yeah, and that's. You know, that was a big regret, although I had the time of my life in Italy. But, you know, playing in the lower leagues, you know, it's a scrap every week.
It's a grind. That money, the Treviso were that kind of contract, was it better than the money in France?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'd never earned the money that they were talking. And that's why I thought, you know, why would you want me to play another game? And I didn't get the whole you know, playing another game. And I suppose I was still in negotiation. It was just the coach that made me realise that I'd made the wrong decision. You know, when I went back, he said, well, you know, how long is it going to be before you come back? And anyway, that's life, I guess.
Another experience.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a great experience, because I played in promotion playoffs. I played in relegation playoffs against Reggiana. I saw things that I've never seen before. You know,
such as?
Without saying too much, one of my best friends was Marcos Gro, who played at Atalanta. He played in the Serie A, Sampdoria. I remember being with him at lunch after training one morning, and someone from another club called him up and asked him if he was willing to sell one of his apartments. And he said, yeah, no problem, you know, whereabouts and you know, how much? And he said a figure, and then he realised that they were trying to buy the game. And when he realised what was going on, he kind of said, nah, you know, I'm not interested. And the guy said, well, you know, there'll be another couple of players, 2 or 3 players who will be willing to sell apartments. So, you know, we kind of knew that.
So that was the code, was it?
Well, yeah, we didn't know. I didn't know, but, you know, the Italians kind of understand. You know, the other one was sitting in the dressing room before the game, and the coach said, "Today we're going to draw." And I was like, "How do you draw a game?" And I remember sitting next to the player, or the player next to me, and I said, "How do you draw a game? How is that even possible?" And he said, "Oh, if we score, they've got to let us score. If they score, we will let them score." And I was thinking, really? Anyway, I got player of the match. I had a great game because I couldn't. How do you go out to a game and not play at your best?
I don't know.
You know, I did not. Anyway, I got.
Was the game drawn?
Yeah, the game was drawn.
Okay. Did you get a draw bonus for that one?
No. You know, the weird thing was that during the game, we scored first, and I remember at the edge of the box there was a player. It was a one-on-one. I think it was a counter, and I chased back, and he was dribbling, and I was thinking, is this guy going to shoot? And by the end, he shot, and I put my foot out, and he started yelling at me, saying, "You got to let us score." And I thought, well, you could have shot beforehand, mate.
You had plenty of time, buddy.
You know, and we ended up drawing the game. It wasn't nice, to be honest with you. Then there was the last game. The last club that I was at was Sesto. We were already in the playoffs, and the team we were playing against was Mestre, and I think they had to draw or win the game against us not to get relegated. And so, but it depended on what happened at another ground as well. So anyway, the game's going on. It was very hard to explain, but
no, the two results.
Yeah, so our game got started later because their president went off, and so it started 15 minutes later. And it was all because you're going to know the result at the other game, so you know what your result's going to be.
Yeah.
And then the other game, there were flares thrown on the field at half time, so they started 15 minutes later. So we ended up at the same time. We ended up finishing it roughly about the same time. But I remember we were up 1-0, and then they ended up scoring, and then I think they had to win the game. In the end, their team or their bench was saying, they've scored, you've got to let us score. And we looked at our bench, and our bench were going, nah, because someone's on the phone over there or the radio, whatever it was, and they're going, nah, they haven't scored. And then they were going again, we've scored, and we look at the bench, nah, they haven't scored. So there's no chance of, and it's very hard for a midfielder to let the opposition score anyway. It's more the defenders or whatever. And then you hear they've scored, and we looked at the bench and they go, yeah, they've scored. And then the referee must have caught on to what was going on, blew the full-time whistle. And then there was a big punch on between, not the players, between the football directors and committees down on the other side. And I was thinking every week there was a fight. Every week.
Bit of drama.
And you're caught in the middle of a lot of them as well. And the worst ones are in the tunnels. When we played Cremonese, I think it was probably the scariest, where the tunnel was not much bigger than me, and you probably fit two players wide.
Yeah.
And it goes down and then meets in the tunnel, and there was a big punch on in there, and so there was a lot of experiences like that. But in saying that, I played with some amazing footballers. I made some amazing friends. Filippo Galli, who played at AC Milan in the Gullit years, and Stefano Ranio, and against Stefano Salvatore. A lot of these players played, AC Milan.
Yeah.
Because the second club that I went to was a feeder club for AC Milan as well. Okay. So
yeah. Okay.
But
still another great experience of being a pro footballer.
Yeah, well, you had to learn how to protect yourself as well. It was either kick or be kicked. And yeah, I probably was on the first one.
Get in first and worry about the second bit later. Fair enough. All right, so you came home after that, played in the NSL again with what was then Adelaide United.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aurelio Vidma had a big... I was still under contract, to be honest, in Italy. But my wife was pregnant with our second child, and she was desperate to come home. And then Adelaide United started up, and then Aurelio Vidma had a big part to play, along with Gordon Pickard and Ron Wall, who was his right-hand man at the club. And that was tough that year. I mean, it was a good year, but it was tough because we played 2 or 3 games. We played on the Friday night and then again on the Sunday afternoon. And we ended up finishing 3rd, and yeah, it was a good season. to be honest. We had a massive crowd in the first game against Brisbane Strikers. I think it was a sellout, 17,000. And the noise that the Adelaide United supporters made that day was incredible. It was incredible. It was up there with European crowds.
Yeah. All right. So how did Aurelio the player translate into Aurelio the coach?
Well, Aurelio wasn't the coach. He was still a player at the time. So
was he? Oh,
yeah. So he was our captain. But because I was very, very close with Aurelio.
And that was the draw card to come back.
Yeah, and I called him up and I said, look, what do you think? What's it like? And whatever else. And so he had a big part to play for me coming back. He ended up being the coach, the assistant coach of the A-League.
That's right. Okay. That's later on.
Yeah. And he did very well as a coach. He was very successful with Adelaide United, with the Asian Champions League. I think he was equal first.
Yeah.
But I'd moved on, and we had a good team. We had Daniel Beltrami in goals. There was Ange Costanzo, Michael Valkanis in the centre of defence. I think it was myself, Carl Viet. Then we had Fernando Rec, Shen Ching Q in the A-League. Diego, the Brazilian, came after. Bobby Petter. But we had a lot of good young players. Matthew Kemp, who I played against in Italy, who became friends when we were in Italy together. So it was.
So fast forwarding to the rivalry between Adelaide, Melbourne, Victoria, South Australia, and in our case, the A-League, Adelaide United and Melbourne Victory built up a rapport and a rivalry very quickly, probably fast-tracked by a couple of mates of yours, Cozzy and Kev. They helped things along the way with some great acting, we'll call it that, and it continued on from there. What's your recollections of the period?
You know what? We played our first friendly game, I think it was in Bendigo.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Friendly game against Melbourne Victory, and I remember we flew into Melbourne, had to drive by, how far is it? It was like 2 hours or something?
Bendigo's nearly 3 hours out of Melbourne.
3 hours? Yeah.
It's a fair one.
We flew into Melbourne and our flight was delayed. So anyway, we ended up getting to the game, and the game should have started. So if it started at 3 o'clock, we were there at 3:10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And Archie Thompson was playing, and we all knew Archie Thompson was a top player and whatever else. And basically, we made a conscious decision not to dive in with Archie Thompson, because Archie could nick past you, but Archie wasn't a great dribbler. So the reason why he dribbled past players is because players used to dive in and commit themselves, so he'd get past them that way. But if you stayed on your feet, it wasn't easy for him to get past you, because he's not that natural.
No. He actually, if you watch him run with the ball, he actually, instead of using his instep or his outstep, he actually stands on the ball and he can make a flat ball bobble.
Yeah.
So he's got some faults if you watch properly.
And I'm not taking anything away from him.
No, he's a great player, but
he was fantastic. But that's so we made a conscious decision with that. But anyway, we played that game. Whether it ended 0-0 or whatever it was, I can't remember. And then we played them in Melbourne, Olympic Park, the old Olympic Park, which I had so many great memories there. I remember driving to the ground and there was a sign, us turning into the ground, sold out. So we thought, this is amazing. And I remember Carl Viet scoring the only goal for us to win the game. And Carl Viet scored the first goal the first ever goal of the A-League as well.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I remember setting him up as well with the ball into the box. So that was probably they were the first memories of Melbourne Victory. Then there was a game in Adelaide. I think Richie Alagich got sent off within 15 minutes, but we had scored from the kickoff. I think it was Lewis Brain scored, or Matthew Kemp or someone, and we ended up holding on. We defended for the whole game, so it was always a tough game. And being a proud South Australian, growing up in South Australia, it was an honour to play for Adelaide United. And South Australia, Victoria, as you mentioned, and so there was always that rivalry there. But then had Kevin Muscat, who's a really good friend of mine, captaining the Melbourne Victory as well. So we had some tussles in there. But obviously you're alluding to the grand final.
Well, it's funny. Well, not so much funny. The grand final is part of the story, right? And it's part of the rich history which you're clearly involved in. And in many regards, from a Melbourne point of view, you're the pantomime villain. Everyone likes a villain or likes to dislike a villain in a sporting sense, right? But I could be wrong. I might have my stats altogether wrong. But prior to the grand final, there was the semi or the prelim at Etihad. I think it was 1-1, right?
Yeah.
And because of the away goals and it was 2 legs and all that, at 1-1, Adelaide are getting the home grand final. Yeah. And then Robinson scores in the last minute, changes the 2-legged result. Melbourne Victory get the home grand final. Is that right? Yeah.
So we played at Etihad just before that game. We played at Etihad, and I think there was something like 42,000 or
big crowds.
Yeah, it was a massive crowd. It was a league game, and so it was the first game we played against Melbourne Victory that season, because Melbourne Victory the second season they were unbeaten up until round 9 or something that we played them at Etihad, or what's it called now, Marvel
Stadium. It's been everything.
I remember from the kick-off, we ended up going forward, and then there was a cross into the box, and the ball came back out, and I went to control it, and it slipped off of my thigh, and Fred, who was a phenomenal player for Melbourne back then, pinched the ball off of me. But as I went to kick the ball, I ended up kicking him, and then there was a big melee with Brebner and whatever else, and I was thinking, here we go. It was after not even 2 minutes, and I thought, oh no, this is gonna end bad. And I ended up getting a yellow card. Brebner got a yellow card, and Greg Owens, I think, scored. But so I was on a yellow card, and I remember committing a foul on the far side, and I went to ground thinking that I'm going to get a yellow card here. And while I was on the ground, Cozzy subbed me. So I ended up,
clever.
On the far side, and Greg Owens, was it Greg Owens or Nathan Burns? One of them scored. And so I was running, not that I was running to do anything, I was running because I was celebrating, and I was running down the side of the field. And all I remember is bottles being launched and whistles, and I was thinking, oh, gosh. So anyway, I didn't worry. I went to the bench, and I think that was the Muscat Cosmina incident. I think so. Anyway, after the game, we went to our supporters, which were behind the goals, and we went to clap them to say thank you for coming and whatnot, and, as you do, because our supporters, Adelaide United supporters, were fantastic. Mm. And all I remember was bottles. We were dodging bottles because they were being launched.
Oh, really?
By the Melbourne Victory supporters, yeah. Full bottles of like Coke and water. Not the full, they had the bit in, and so they would fly. And kind of laughing at it because we were thinking, what the hell's going on? I've never experienced this in Australia, ever. Italy, yes. Rocks. We were dodging rocks. And I remember we were cited by the FFA. There was it must have been 8 or 9 of us for inciting the crowd.
Oh, for going out and doing that in front of the fans, whatever.
Yeah, but we went to our fans.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But
and anyway, the club came out and said they were going to thank our fans, as we did every single game. Anyway, we got off with nothing happened, but we were cited for inciting the fans, which was ridiculous. But then, so Melbourne Victory were clearly the best team that year. I think we finished second. I'm pretty sure we did. So that game there in Melbourne that you're talking about, so it's 1-1. And I remember the ball coming across, and Robbo hits the back of his head.
Yeah. Wasn't the world's greatest header, was it?
Oh, it was ridiculous. I always said to him, I said, mate, that was the worst goal I've ever seen in my life. I was just upset because we lost the game. But it's gone up Beltrami's head into the far corner. And, we were so close to holding the grand final. And
correct.
Was that if we did, it was going to be played out of Footy Park.
Yeah.
I don't think exists anymore. Or they just trained out of it. And it was disappointing. It was disappointing for our supporters.
Sliding doors moment, literally on the back of that goal, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then we played, I think we went to penalties against Newcastle at home. to get into the grand final. But at that stage there, myself personally, I was in a lot of pain with my back. I didn't realise that I had a cracked disc in my back. I had referred pain into my heels. I used to go and warm up before our warm-up at training just so I could start the warm-up.
Yeah.
Or else I'd be in bits. And I probably should have ended my career there, but it ended badly. And I remember nothing was going right in the day before the game you train at the familiarisation session at the stadium, and I just remember that there was a bit of nerves, and I spoke to the players on the bus and said, look, we've got nothing to lose. What are we going to lose?
Yeah,
that's a grand final. Yeah, whatever. I mean, just trying to calm the players down. We had plenty to lose.
Of course, you had your job on the line.
And then we should have been 1-0 up. And I remember Muskie going through Diego on the halfway line on the far side and went through it. It was a straight red card. And, you couldn't understand why I didn't get the red card. Probably because it was in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Anyway, it should be 1-0 up. We're 2-0 down. And going back to Archie Thompson, saying the 9 games we played against Melbourne Victory in 2 seasons, Archie hadn't scored a goal against us. And
just saving it all for the one occasion.
Yeah. So, but at 2-0 down, I think I jumped into a tackle, which was stupid of me against Fred. I didn't get him. He jumped out of the way. And looking back at it, because I didn't watch that game for years, I didn't even want to see the highlights.
Yeah.
Because it was the worst day and the saddest day in my football career. Mm. And more that it hurt my wife and my kids and my mother and father, and we've got 3 sisters. And, for my brother, I think he was still away, so it didn't really matter too much to him. But I copped it, and rightly so. But the second yellow card, I was convinced that I hit Brebner with my shoulder, and anyway. Was sent off, and we lost the game, and I knew what was coming. And after the game, I was silly because like I said, and this is the God's honest truth, I thought I hit him hip and shoulder.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to lie, I was in tears after the game because I knew what was coming, like I said. Anyway, I ended up parting company with Adelaide United. I think the owner at the time thought that I was going to go for nothing. I was on peanuts anyway. I'm pretty sure I was the lowest paid captain ever that existed in the A-League, and because I was just happy and proud to play for Adelaide United in the South Australian team, because like I said, I'm proud South Australian. But it was only until we were flying back the next day, and this is the first time I saw the footage, and probably the only time in years.
Yeah.
That I realised that I didn't hit Brebner with my shoulder. I actually hit him with my forearm and elbow. And I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And so that night there on the news, I apologised to Adelaide United, the football club, the fans, because, I thought I'd hip and shouldered him, and I didn't realise how bad it was. And I let everyone down. And so that's part of football. It was a sad moment, and I ended up playing my last year at Wellington Phoenix.
Yeah, just before we get to, as footballers, right, along the journey, we all have those moments, whether it's a red card, I don't know. We all have moments that we'll call mistakes, and we'll call that a mistake. So, going back to when we were talking about the older guys when we were younger, that we learnt off, and that's probably where you learn that if, you see them, they get a red card, and then they come in and apologise to the room. And when you're a young kid and you haven't seen it, you go, oh, okay, that's kind of what happens here. I take the heat, I take the responsibility, I wear it, I own it, and my teammates will respect me for doing that. And I guess we learn from the older guys. And in this case, you would have apologised, but you haven't had to apologise to a dressing room. You've had to apologise to South Australia, right? Okay. So how does that weigh down on a person who, like you said, is a proud South Australian? That's not just going into a room of 16 guys and a coach, and, the odd hanger on. That's a big responsibility takes a lot of balls to do it, I'm going to say it. But it's still got to weigh on you.
Yeah, you know what? It was, like I said, it was horrible. You know, not that I went through depression, because I didn't go through depression, but I went through depressive moments where, you know, it's not that you still got to go. So I was working at the time as well, funnily enough. You know, it was a professional league, but I was still working in my own business. So I still had to go and show my face in public. Yep. I still have to say, you know, and I think it was publicised everywhere. You know, the grand final, and there was a massive crowd, one of the biggest definitely the biggest at that time, at that period. You know, the big loss, the send-off. It was my first send-off ever in Australia. Unless someone's going to tell me any different. I'm pretty sure it was the first time I had ever been sent off in A-League or NSL. So it was tough. And yeah, like I said, you know, you're apologising to a whole state that you've let down, and you've let them down. And I did. I let them down. You know, would have I felt any different if we lost the game and I was still on the field? We still lost. I still would have felt, you know, the same, the embarrassment, you know, but the embarrassment of and again, it was more that I knew what was happening to my wife and my kids and my mother and father, because, you know, people have got parents, you know, people have got children, you know, especially when they're getting criticised publicly. But I had to cop it on the chin. That was it. It was bad luck. It was bad luck for me because it was my stupidity. It wasn't someone else's. It was my actions. And that's just how it went.
Yeah, part of football, but like I said, it's a big scale from apologising to a change room and to a squad of players to actually having to apologise to a whole state. That's big stakes, and you're paying for the game being huge publicity, huge crowds. We're finally getting the attention we want in terms of media coverage, and probably that Sunday night and that Monday, you didn't want any of that coverage. You didn't want any of that attention. Yeah.
No, I suppose, no, not at all.
Finally, the game's come.
I'm laughing now, but it was,
it
was a horrible, whatever that period was, it was horrible.
So tell me about Wellington and what it did for you.
Far out. So I went from, it was weird because the day that I had agreed to leave Adelaide United, so I was in a meeting, there was the horse races up in the hills, Oakbank it's called. And I remember driving up, and my agent at the time, or the guy that was looking after me, said, you've got two clubs that want to sign you, Perth and Wellington. And I go, Wellington? Where's Wellington? Because they weren't even in the league. And he said, Wellington's in New Zealand. I said, I know he's in New Zealand. I said, but where are they in New Zealand? Anyway. And he said, and Ricky Herbert is going to be the coach. And Ricky had just taken over the Auckland Kings for the last part of the season. And team coach and had done really well. And I think David Mitchell was the coach at Perth. Anyway, he said, Ricky's really keen on signing you. They don't want to negotiate. They just want to know what you want. And it'll be a yes or a no. And again, I never played for the money. So I just said a little bit more than what I was on anyway at Adelaide United, thinking that I was getting a payout from Adelaide United, so I didn't need much. Plus, I was running my own business, so I'd have to leave that for a year. And he came back to me within 2 minutes and said, "Yep, they want to sign you." And I was thinking, "Oh my God, I could have asked for more." But anyway, I mean, I was joking. That was never ever an interest of mine. And so I went to Wellington, and I remember signing. And the owner, Terry Serapisos, Ricky Herbert, and the guy that was doing the accountancy for the club took me out to dinner, and we went to a sports bar. And on the big screen, the massive screen, there was the grand final comes up. So they were announcing that I'd just signed for the club, and then they showed the send off and whatnot. And I was that embarrassed. I hung my head, which I very rarely do. And I was like that. And I said to Ricky, I said, "I'm really sorry." I said, "But that's not me." And he goes, No, don't be silly. He goes, "The people of Wellington will love you for that." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but that's embarrassing. That's not me. You know, I play for the team. I fight for the team. And he goes, yeah, I know. That's why I signed you. He goes, but the people in Wellington will love you for that. And I was thinking, how the hell are they going to love me for being sent off? You know, anyway, they explained to me hard on sleeve and whatever else. I went from, I'd say, being pretty disliked at that time, at that period of time in Adelaide because of the grand final and that, to going to Wellington where we drew 2-2 with Melbourne Victory in our first game. They asked me to be the captain of Wellington 3 times and I refused the first 2 times. Sorry, they asked me twice. You know, I said, look, no, I want to play 1 year and that's it and I'm done. And I'm happy to help out wherever I can, but captain I don't want to be. And I remember it was the team lunch at the owner's house and he's got, I think, a 3-4 story house. And they pulled me into, so it was the owner and the coach pulled me into the lounge room and they said, we're not asking you now, we're telling you you're going to be captain of Wellington. And I said, okay, it's a huge honour because it's a massive honour to captain anyone. You know, I was captain of Adelaide United in the A-League and that was a huge honour. But so that season started off really well at Wellington until I think round 8 or 9 where I think round 5 they wanted me to sign on for another year and I was in bits. And I said to them, my back is that bad. My heels are killing me. I said, let me play until the end of the season and then we'll decide then. Round 8 or 9, we played Central Coast Mariners. I got a ball played to me because someone got in trouble and they played it. And I remember Sesto, I think that was his name. Saf Petrovsky.
Oh, yeah.
Saf Petrovsky for Mariners coming towards me. And I thought he was going to come in for a tackle. So I kind of jumped in the air to go onto the ball and he didn't. And I jarred my back. And at half time, I went in and I said, oh, can you rub my glutes and, you know, adjust my back? We went to Adelaide the following week. It was the first time I was playing Adelaide United. I could barely move. I went and saw my chiropractor who's Carl Viet's wife. And she said, oh, I think you got a little bit more than just your back being out.
Not the stuff you want to hear, is it?
No. Well, and I remember playing that game and the supporters were actually really kind to me, you know, Adelaide United supporters. And like I said, I don't begrudge anyone for disliking me at that time for the grand final for what I did because you know, I let everyone down. But they were really, really kind to me. And, you know, as the years went on, they were great towards me as well. But we went to Perth and Ricky pulled me aside. He said, listen, you're not going to play. And when you get back, you're going to have an MRI. And so when I went back, I had 2 cracked discs in my back. One fresh one old one.
Yeah.
And that kept me out for a long time. But before that period, I remember driving into the grounds at Westpac Stadium and the security that was letting me in, he goes, have a look up there. And I was looking and there's a whole apartment blocks right across near the train station. If anyone's been there, they know there's a train station, there's apartment blocks on the other side. And there was a big sign, Aloisi for mayor. And I was like, I saw the sign in the stadium as well. And then, you know, I was absolutely loved by the people there. And it was a shock because my mind was in Adelaide, thinking that I've let all these people down and you know, no one likes to be disliked, but you know, that's part of the game.
Yeah.
Well, your actions, you got to live with them. You make your bed, you lie in it. To going to a place where I was absolutely loved, to the point where if we went out to dinner or if we went to a bar after the games, which we had to do anyway with Wellington Phoenix, security would take me from one place to the other. And I was like, I'll be all right. It's only a small place anyway. And the guy always said to me, he goes, it takes one idiot. That's all it takes, one idiot. And I was like, you know, no problem. And so anyway, I had a great time over there, apart from when I wasn't playing, that became really tough because for a long period I was on my own.
Yeah.
And if the players, you know, the team went into state, it wasn't like there was a lot of us left over. There was probably 2 or 3 and most of them would have been young kids. So I had a few friends outside of football, but yeah, it became lonely, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think one of the highlights was playing against David Beckham. LA Galaxy.
And you got his shirt too, I believe.
I did.
Yeah.
So it was at that period we were playing Adelaide United the night before, and like I said, my back was done, my calf muscle was playing up, I remember I said to Ricky, I'm right to play because I really wanted to play. And he said, you're not. He goes, you'll play against LA Galaxy on tomorrow or Sunday, whatever it was. But I remember doing the press conference, and I'd never seen so many press before in my life, more than the A-League Grand Final, because you had Beckham and Gullit was the coach. And they did a little story in New Zealand. They had two professional footballers, if you wanted to call me a professional. Just because we were in the professional league didn't mean that we were professional. Anyway, it's a joke. And they had David Beckham worth millions, married to posh spies, how many cars he's got, houses. And then they had Ross Aloisi. And they come to me and they said, and where do you live? And I said, in an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment here at Lamington Square, whatever it was. And I can't remember where it was. And what car do you drive? And I said, I can't remember. It was a Mitsubishi station wagon or something. And David Beckham's got this, and then David Beckham's got that. And it was a joke.
Yeah. It was good.
Obviously. Yeah. And I thought it was hilarious. I really did. But at the press conference, they were doing an interview after, and they'd interviewed Beckham. He was on my left, and I could see him at the corner of my eye. And the reporter said, what do you got in store for Beckham on the weekend? And I said, I'm going to ask him for his shirt.
What else am I going to do?
Yeah, I don't know. What he thought I was going to try and kick him or something. I probably couldn't get near him. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. And as I said it, Beckham was walking past me, and I said, hey, by the way, can I have your shirt after the game? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. And that was it. Didn't say anything else to him apart from going into the warm-up. And I remember Richard Johnson, who was a very, very good friend of mine. He played for Watford for many years.
That's right. Yeah.
And I said, John, I can't play. I said, my calf is killing me. And he said, what do you care about playing? Go on there, toss the coin, take a photo with Beckham, and then and come off. And I thought, oh, okay, because I couldn't run. I was struggling bad. But when we started the game, I think within 15 minutes I scored. Yeah. So we're 1-0 up against LA Galaxy, and David Beckham and the crowd, I think it was a sellout, were going nuts. And so the adrenaline was kicking in. And anyway, I think I lasted 45 or 40 minutes or whatever. I actually may have come off in the second half. But I remember coming off and I got a standing ovation. And I thought, this is amazing. It was the second time I had a standing ovation in Wellington. I'll explain the one later.
Yeah.
And I thought, it was sad because I knew that was it. That I wasn't going to play anymore. And I was sitting on the bench, and all I could think of was getting Beckham's shirt. And I could see Mickey Ferrante, Vinny Leah.
They're all loitering.
Yeah, they were around Beckham. And Harry Narder, who was a reporter in Wellington, straight after the game comes up to me, and I'm thinking, don't interview me now. How am I going to get this shirt? Anyway, he's interviewing me and he's saying, great, you scored and blah, 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 whatever he said. And then he goes, all right, I'll let you go and get your shirt now. I think Beckham's waiting for you. And I turned around, and to his credit, I asked him 2 days before if I could have his shirt. He did not swap his shirt with anyone, although they all went there and asked for it and waited for me. And I remember saying to him, because I hadn't been playing and training, not that I was fat, but I was a little bit heavier than I normally was. And here's Beckham takes off his shirt, full of tattoos, ripped. And I always played with an undershirt, a sleeveless one.
Yeah.
And I said to him, surely you don't want my shirt? And he goes, yeah, of course. I said to him, what for? What are you going to do with it? And he goes, no, we're swapping shirts. I said, all right. And I took it off, and it was kind of embarrassing, really, because he was so cut. And I remember the crowd going nuts that he took his shirt off. And anyway, then I went into the dressing room and I said to the players, thank you so much for coming to my testimonial. Very good. It was an amazing time, but it was a good time. That after party was something special too.
I can imagine. So tell me about the second.
The second red card was Sydney FC. I came on off of the bench, and I'm pretty sure I went through Ufuk Talay. And I remember getting a straight red. And I don't know if I thought I got the ball, but probably not. probably I never watched it back. And not that I did it on purpose, because Ufuk is a friend of mine. And plus Tony Popovich was in the other team as well, which is a friend, but also a friend or not friend, he'll go through you if he had to.
Yeah. No,
as we all did. And he's a scary man. Anyway, we played under 16 World Cup together, like I said, so I've known him for many years. But I remember walking off the field, I got a standing ovation for a red card, and I was that was embarrassing too. But I think the supporters saw how much I wanted to win and I put into the team, and the amount of running that I did. So that's the Kiwis are like that. They just want you to give your best.
Yeah.
So I think that was my second red card in the A-League, apart from the grand final. And yeah, so that was twice I had a standing ovation. One was for a good reason, one wasn't for such a good reason. But they were amazing. The club were amazing. The supporters were amazing. I was lucky enough to play for two amazing clubs in Adelaide United and Wellington Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I'm forever grateful. And even the mistakes that I made in my career and decisions that I made that I wish I hadn't, I'm extremely grateful that I got the opportunity to play for my home state. I got the opportunity to play for Wellington Phoenix and represent not just the Phoenix but New Zealand and all Kiwis. And and I can honestly say that I gave everything. I gave my heart and soul for both clubs.
And I have no doubt that that's how people will remember you. We can't go through this whole conversation. One of the most important moments in Australian soccer history.
Yeah.
That other bloke in the backyard with you was very heavily responsible. I always say that between that and the Kathy Freeman moment, I can't split them, right? So that's the two greatest sporting moments for me. And with all such special occasions, the JFK murder, Elvis dying, your brother's goal, I always want to know where people were and what they were doing. Where were you?
I was at the stadium. So I was on the PFA executive at the time. There was a number of us. If I remember correctly, it was John Didlitzer was in charge anyway. Then there was Ante Milicic on it, Steve Corica, I think David Drilic, Danny Hay, who's now the head coach of the New Zealand national team. So after our executive meeting, we were going to the ground. So I was in the car with Steve Corica and David Drilic, I think, and I ended up, we were in a gridlock for I don't know how long. We hadn't moved for half hour, 45 minutes, so they decided to park the car and we'll catch a train there. So we caught a train to the stadium, and then there was all of us, plus Danny Hay, a few others. Anyway, I was on the side of where the family were, where John ran to after the game. But I remember going to the ground and I spoke to John. He's never mentioned this, but he remembers it because we spoke about it ages ago. And he was pretty disappointed that he wasn't starting. And as a brother, as a parent or whatever, but it's my brother, little brother. And I said, although he had a much better career than what I had and achieved so much more, but you're still my younger brother. And I said, look, if you started the game and you came off and you didn't score a goal, would you be happy? And he said, no. And I said, if you come on and you score a goal, would you be happy? Yeah, of course I would. I said, so then come on and score the winning goal. And then you'd be happy. So don't focus on not starting. Focus on coming on, not knowing that it was going to go to penalties and that he was going to hit the last one. And he was like, I suppose. And when he did, it was that and the Adelaide United, the first season. So the loudest noise was at that game there with the supporters when the final penalty kick went in. Yeah. And Adelaide United, they were the two most memorable crowds that I remember. I mean, there's a couple of others, but they're the two loudest at the time. One I was involved with, one my brother was involved with. So I was there, and it was extremely exciting, and something that we dreamt of as kids. You dreamt of playing for Australia. Playing in the backyard. I was either Charlie Villani or Joe Mullen in the backyard, or then Aurelio Vidmar, or and my brother would be, I think it was always Joe Mullen. Then you dream of going to the World Cup, and then John scored in the World Cup as well, and that was amazing. So
So just going back to that moment when he's walking up to take the penalty, and by this stage everyone's probably asking, is this the one? If we win, is this it? Just making sure, because we're Aussie football fans and there's always heartbreak, or there's something going on in the background that spoils it for us. So take us through that 30 seconds or so. What's going through your mind? What were you thinking? Great, this is my brother, we're home. Shit, this is my brother, don't miss.
No, I don't know what I was thinking. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I just remember him, I was probably thinking, I hope he doesn't miss. I hope he doesn't miss. I'm pretty sure I would have been thinking that. Instead of thinking positive thoughts, I was thinking the negative. But, he scored. So, I honestly, if I had to tell you, I'd be lying, because I can't remember what I was thinking.
Yeah. I can imagine what you were thinking straight after. But a great moment, and very special, obviously, for the family. And for your mum and dad, that would have been one of the best moments of all time, I can imagine.
Yeah, look, it was. Like I said, our father, he worked with us a lot, as far as football went. There's only so much he could teach us as well. But he taught us discipline, and that if you're going to achieve anything, you have to work hard for it, and nothing comes easy. Just certain values, he taught us. And my mum's a very religious person, very quiet. And, I probably got I look more like my mother, but I've got my father's character. So we're not too stupid things. My father's like, you got to be smarter. I didn't teach you that way. And I'll be like, yeah, but who do I take after?
Throw it right back at him.
Because you don't want to upset your father. You don't want to disappoint him.
Of course.
But I know it was a very proud moment for our parents, and again for our sisters, and our grandmother's still alive. She's 93, 94. She came to 1992, the grand final in Melbourne.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She used to come to all my games when I was playing state league. She'd come to all the NSL games. So it was a proud moment for everyone. But in saying that, what Australian football's like. You get people that get sick and tired of seeing your face. So it becomes hard sometimes, because there's a criticism, whether it's your brother, whether it's your sister, whether it's your parents. But it was an amazing time at the time, and I don't know if anyone watched it, but what was it called? October 17th or November 17th?
The documentary.
It was on TV yesterday morning, and
okay.
And I didn't have much to do, and I ended up watching it again. And
I was thinking that when I was preparing for this, and I think it doesn't matter if it's on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, when you see it, and there's many times, and we must have all watched it, especially the goal, thousands of times, but try walking away from it. Impossible. You can't walk away. You can never say, I'm not going to watch it this time.
Nah. We're
all drawn in. If you're a football fan in this country, that's your moment. You're going, no way, no.
And it'll never happen again. Unless, well, not in our lifetime anyway, unless Australia don't make the World Cup, touch wood, or goodness knows how many years
correct.
It happened. And plus the disappointments too. I remember I'm pretty sure I was in Switzerland at the time when the Iran game was on. What year was that?
97.
Yeah, I would have been in Switzerland. And I remember I couldn't talk. I didn't talk for 2 days. I remember going to training. It was myself and David Zrilic, because we were in the same team, and it was devastation. Yeah.
No, I went to the game, and the not being able to talk, I can relate to that, because it was just crazy. Could not put words. Anyway, there you go. But then I'm a Bulldog supporter, and I spent 2 months earlier there with the Adelaide preliminary final, losing by a couple of points. So by that stage, that couple of months at the MCG was not a fun couple of months for me, let me tell you. Look, mate, I've kept you for a very long time. I do appreciate the time you've taken to have a chat. I really appreciate honesty and being open with me and sharing your experiences. It's been a great story. Like I said, your passport will be full of stamps from all over the joint, including your travels with the Socceroos, the young Socceroos and the Olyroos. We didn't even get a chance to talk about. You went to the Olympics as well, for God's sake. in '96 Atlanta. You've had a great career, a full career, but I still think there's plenty more to come in the coaching. You're still giving back to the game, and congrats on that, and the lucky girls and the program that you're involved with. But I look forward to your next chapter and chapters, and watching with interest as you continue up the coaching tree. Wish you all the luck and all the best for the future.
Thank you very much, George, and thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure coming on as well. Thank you.
My pleasure.